Who was Jesus? Is he a historical character? Who wrote the Gospels? Why are they written in Greek? Why did they have a pro-Roman perspective? Why was the religion headquartered in Rome? Those were the mysteries that I saw about the Gospel. Who wrote the Gospels? Why are they written in Greek? Why did they have a pro-Roman perspective? Why was the religion headquartered in Rome? Those were the mysteries that I saw about the Gospels. Who wrote the Gospels? Why are they written in Greek? Why did they have a pro-Roman perspective? Why was the religion headquartered in Rome? Those were the mysteries that I saw about the Gospels.
The origin of the Christian religion has been a subject steeped in mystery for nearly 2,000 years. Joseph,
one of the most powerful men on earth, holds a position that has existed for nearly 2,000 years. As the world changes and faith evolves, his authority remains. What began with one apostle has become 1.2 billion followers under one man. He is the head of the Catholic Church, the Pope. And this is his path to power. In this episode, never-before-seen artifacts from the earliest days of Christianity show how a small group of rebels turn an illegal movement into the largest religion on the planet, and how, against all odds, the papacy endures.
This is something that has never happened before. The Vatican this morning publicly displayed what's believed to be bone fragments from St. Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ and the world's first pope.
Pope Francis is the 266th leader of the Catholic Church. For the last 2,000 years, despite an ever-changing world, Catholics have looked to the Pope as a beacon of faith, morality, and divine guidance. But who is this figure that means so much to so many? And how did he come to be one of the most powerful men on earth?
People look to the Pope to have something to say on almost everything.
He transcends the Catholic Church.
I don't think there's any other religious figure that people recognize as much as they recognize the Pope.
But before the Pope had the ear of 1.2 billion followers worldwide, he was a philosopher, a leader of an underground movement, and an outlaw.
Peter was one of the 12 apostles. He used to walk with Jesus, essentially. So he's an important figure for that reason alone.
In the Gospels, when the apostles go fishing,
Peter was one of the 12 apostles. He used to walk with Jesus, essentially. So he's an important figure for that reason alone.
In the Gospels, When the apostles go fishing in Galilee, Peter is told, "You are Peter," which means rock. "And on this rock I will build my church, and I will give to you the keys of the kingdom of heaven."
And Jesus Christ said to Peter, "Who do you say I am?" And Peter said, "You're the Christ. You're the Son of God." So he became the authenticating voice.
Peter himself, as the one who voiced the confession, becomes a symbol of the unwavering faith that Jesus is the Son of God, which is then the center of the Christian church.
Though the word Pope is not used for hundreds of years, the foundation of the sacred
voice.
Peter himself, as the one who voiced the confession, becomes
to you the keys of the kingdom of heaven.
And Jesus Christ said,
which means rock. "And on this rock I will build my church, and I will give to you the keys of the kingdom of heaven."
And Jesus Christ said to Peter, "Who do you say I am?" And Peter said, "You're the Christ. You're the Son of God."
Son of God.
So he became the authenticating voice.
Peter himself, as the one who voiced the confession, becomes a symbol of the unwavering faith that Jesus is the Son of God, which is then the center of the Christian church.
The center of
Though the word Pope is not used for hundreds of years, the foundation of the sacred office is entwined in Peter's legacy.
The popes are, if you like, the inheritors of the apostolic generation.
It's this idea of the papacy being the rock, a source of permanence in an age of anxiety that people know is steady.
Peter preaches that Jesus Christ died for the sins of man, and accepting that truth is the key to salvation.
Accepted truth.
Others teach different variations of that message. But regardless of interpretation, in the first century, any follower of Christ is seen as a threat to the Roman Empire and hunted for his beliefs.
When you think about the beginning of the Christian movement, it's astonishing that
So this is where they get you. They're telling you that, oh, Christian. All right, what do we do when we worship Jesus? All right, let's just get to the grounding, the basis of this argument. What do we do when we worship Jesus? We are worshiping the Son of God, right? Rome is the basis, the center of Christianity. What was Rome? What was the Roman emperor promoting? I am the Son of God, right? What do black kings modernly promote? I'm the Son of God, right? What are these Catholic kingdom monarchies that are black have in common? They claim to be the first Christians. And they claim the title Son of God. So if the Romans was saying we're the Son of God, and they're creating this theology, who was getting hunted in Rome? Because it wasn't the Christians. They'll tell us today, yeah, Christians are being persecuted. No, but Christians were being promoted in Rome. It was the old ways. It was the pre-Christian. They were getting hunted. When you look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, it's all about being hunted because they didn't want to worship statues, Son of Man, and convert to Christianity. But don't just be aware, they're going to tell you through this whole video, Christians this and Christians that. But they're just naming all of us in a broad term Christian. Whether you worship the Creator, whether you worship Jesus, whether you worship Buddha, they're just calling you Christian. Now if we look over here, so it's religious persecution in the Roman Empire. Now if you scroll down to Judaism, see how it's separate from Christianity, because Judaism, or what they call Judaism, predated Christianity. And we think of all of this, we think, oh, this is the original, but this is the new stuff. These are more older beliefs, okay? So when they sit and they look at Rome, they look at, let's say, people who believe in the Creator, and then you have Rastafarians. Let's just use this as an example, okay? And you have Rastafarians, right? So, like today, worshiping just the Creator alone is not promoted. Rastafarian in our communities are, Rastafari is promoted more. So this is what was going on in Rome. Rome was just like we are here today. We live in a metropolitan. We can buy drugs. We can get our own wives, pick our own wives. We can do all these different things. We can live our lives under like a form of slavery. All right. So at that time, all the Judaism and the worshiping of the Creator was being outlawed, and you could really be hurt and or kicked out of Rome because they didn't want you teaching everyone else. So just like today, the Rastafarian back then was Judaism and Christianity. Christianity was the new one. Worship the Son of Man, King of Kings, God of God, conquering. So this is what was happening. So let's read. Tiberius forbade Judaism in Rome, and Claudius expelled them from the city. So this is talking about who we call the Essenes today. However, who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls, which do not speak of Jesus, do not speak of Christianity in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's more attuned to Judaism and what we consider Judaism. However, the passage of Suetonius is ambiguous, because the Jews at Rome caused continuous disturbances at the instigation of Chrestus. He, Claudius, expelled them from the city. Chrestus has been identified as another form of Christus. The disturbance, so if you look at that, we think like this is some baloney. But if you look at the God which they worship, it's Isus. And Isus, so if you look at the information on Isus, similarity to Esau, Welsh Jew, Jesus, but if you look at the worshippers of this person, they're called the bishops of Christ. See, so much information had been taken down because they don't want you to know. But if you research the people who worship Jesus, they're called the bishops of Christ. Right? And then if you look at Jesus, Christus, there's different names of Jesus, and the images is of Jesus. It's Jesus' images. And he's the pillar of the boatman. See, if you look at Jesus, which is Jesus, Jesus means so G means earth, ground, soil, from the earth, Mother Earth, from, and Sus means swine, hog, pig, so any genus of pig. So Jesus means earth pig, or earthly swine, or beast of the earth, the image of corruptible man, the abominable sacrifice of a pig. So they gave you the pig to worship on the altar, which is their thing to do, their theology. If you look, earth, ground, soil, earth pig, it means earth pig. See, they don't teach us. If you look at Zeus, a trend is connected to Jesus. Realize when we worship these Jesus or Zeus, we're worshiping the earth pig.
People are being arrested, they're being tortured, they're being killed in public. You see competition between different disciples, different versions of the message of Jesus.
All of Christ's followers spread throughout the Mediterranean, preaching his message. But the apostles are the men on earth who actually walked with Jesus himself.
There were all of these different cities that had healthy Christian churches in them. But the only one that actually had an apostle at its head was the church in Rome, which was where Peter was centered. Churches in them. But the only one that actually had an apostle at its head was the church in Rome, which was where Peter was centered.
Rome is a giant empire. If you're a Christian, then you're saying that you believe in a man, Jesus, who is a king above all kings and not the Roman king. You are putting yourself in opposition to the Roman Empire. And that becomes a really dangerous situation for early Christians.
Despite the dangers facing Christians in Rome, Peter holds secret gatherings where he preaches the word of Christ.
Rome is a society which is 75 to 80%.
You gotta understand how they flip this backwards on you, okay? They're trying to say that, we know from history that at this time, the Afro-Asians that were in Rome, who are the gladiators, who are the slaves, were uniting, starting to unify, and they're teaching the writings of their ancestors, and once again talking about the coming of the Messiah, or the coming of a Savior who is going to take them out of Rome. So when they talk about all this insurrection and all of this Jesus talk, in actuality, it was actually talking about a military Messiah who would return to retrieve us and take us to a land where we could rule on our own in peace. And they're like, we can't have that, because you know how we empower ourselves when we get a different mind frame.
And slaves. Slaves are not human. They can't marry. They can be bought and sold. They can be whipped and raped. So suddenly there's this movement that's saying, you're a person with dignity who's created in the image of God, and that makes you worthwhile. So that's part of the power of this Christian movement.
Christ's message strikes a chord with the most downtrodden members of Roman society, and Peter's meetings become more and more popular. Inevitably, he catches the eye of one of the cruelest and most sadistic rulers in Roman history, Emperor Nero.
It's funny though, it seems as if they're talking to, you know, if, just like today how we have different nations with us, almost seems as if back then they're speaking to the foreign population and other people, like, look, you are in the image as well. You are not a beast. You are amazing. Everyone is amazing. We're all children of God.
In the summer of 64 AD, a raging fire burns Rome for 6 days, destroying 2/3 of the city.
People say that Emperor Nero started the fire so he could advance his own building projects.
That's interesting.
Some of Rome needed to catch on fire so that he could build the kinds of temples and things that he wanted to honor himself.
You know, that's very interesting when they say that he was actually just trying to destroy the city, like today how we get those government influence and government funded attacks in the homeland, where they seem as if it's there's an agenda or terroristic or any type of way, like maybe it's concerning a law that needs to be passed, and they'll create an atrocity. I just got me thinking, like, did much of what happened when Rome burnt in the time of Nero Vespasian, did that happen because Nero was trying to create public support and wanted to rebuild in his image, in his light, the temples?
Rumors that Nero started the fire himself begin to fly, and he needs a scapegoat.
People are already asking a lot of questions about his sanity, his capacity to rule, and so on. He looks around for a bunch of people that other people don't like.
And the most convenient people to blame it on were the Christians.
Nero says, these are the people.
Or the Hebrews, people who didn't worship Christianity because Christianity was helping them. Christianity was good for them. It was the other ones who wouldn't bend or break, who was moral, who couldn't be bought.
Who are the problem. They're the ones who set the place on fire. Let's do terrible things to them.
They set on fire, right? Isn't that what we're taught today, right? Oh, they did it. They did it. Right?
Nero orders his soldiers to round up as many Christians as they can find.
So they started rounding up Hebrews who wasn't affiliated to Christianity and started killing us. Is that why we went and started barricading up, trying to protect ourselves? Huh? This is a different story you're hearing. You know how they like to tell the truth.
Had them hung to poles and burned alive in his gardens.
He had some of them torn up by wild animals.
It isn't long before Peter is swept up in the raids. He is convicted of insurrection and sentenced to die on the cross.
He is crucified upside down, which...
If this is Edom, Black Rome, the Iberians, haven't you seen through our gangster era us tear up each other with such ferocity, similar to this? And we just replaying we do not change the passage, it just repeats itself.
Which is a really horrible way to die. He says that he does not want to die the same way that his Lord and Savior dies. He wants to die upside down because he's not worthy to die in the same way that Jesus died.
Peter's death is a devastating loss to the early Christian community. But dying in the name of his God makes him a martyr and secures his legacy as the first true leader of the church that will one day become the most powerful force on the planet. History names Peter the first pope. After Peter's violent death, Christians realized they must organize their movement if they have any hope of survival in the face of Roman tyranny.
You see how it's a different story where, like, whoa, we seen them cleaning house, so we positioned and pivoted ourselves in the defensive stance, and we started to be more offensive.
They thought rather like the American revolutionaries, as one of them said, we all have to hang together or we shall surely all hang separately.
They created an agreement with...
See how we say we gotta unify, we gotta be as one, or else we were all gonna perish because they're out to get us.
With a set of rules.
Deep within the private library of the Greek Patriarch in Jerusalem lives the 2,000-year-old document that outlines the first cohesive guidelines of Christianity. It's called the Didache.
This document actually presents the formation of the church in its primitive
age. It's the creation of this church in its primitive age. We got to realize this is not the ancient. This is the new. The ancient are the older manuscripts that we tend to call Old Testament, so that we can just shove it to the side. It's just the old stuff. It's the actual writings. Then we have a nation trying to impose its beliefs on you in the New Testament. Christianity.
Stage.
This sacred text was lost until 1883, when a Greek translation from the 11th century was found. Out of fear of theft or desecration, it has never before been seen on camera, until now.
You don't have a Bible back then. How do you transmit the faith? How do you tell them how to behave? How do you tell them what to do in a service? The Didache does all of that for you.
But outlining the rules is only the first step. Christians also need an infrastructure to enforce those behaviors.
We tend to think about Christianity as being all these basilicas around the world. But before that, what you had were basically house churches. And if you had a series of small house churches, you needed somebody to be over that.
Christians were trying to set up an organized community so that people would recognize who the members of that church were. A kind of hierarchy, sort of modeled on the Roman army.
Bishop of means the most senior churchman in that particular city.
This is how it's modeled on the Roman
And if you
army.
had a series of small house churches, you needed somebody to be over that.
Christians were trying to set up an organized community so that people would recognize who the members of that church were. A kind of hierarchy, sort of modeled on the Roman army.
Modeled on the Roman army.
bishop of means the most senior churchman in that particular city.
Because Rome is the capital and the center of the empire, the Bishop of Rome becomes the leader of the other bishops, a position that will eventually become known as Pope.
Emperor.
The 200 years after Peter's crucifixion. Because Rome is the capital and the center of the empire, the Bishop of Rome becomes the leader of the other bishops.
What is an emperor, right? An emperor is a ruler of many kingdoms, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kingdoms. One ruler, emperor. Romans had emperors ruling over them. If the Catholics created an empire and called one person by a title called the Pope, isn't that the same as emperor? With the same Catholic belief system, isn't that the same thing? We're being fooled here.
A position that will eventually become known as Pope. The 200 years after Peter's crucifixion, bishops and their followers continue to be...
What did Rome do? Rome went and persecuted their brethren, right? Went throughout the world persecuting and ruling over their brethren, right? What did the Pope do since we can go back? What has the Pope done? Pope has ruled in a Catholic sense, persecuting his brother, conquering the lands and ruling over them, right? What has changed? Just the names.
Persecuted and executed by Roman emperors. Until an unlikely hero emerges.
So we always hear about these dates, 300, 700, 900, 1200. All these dates, and they keep playing over and over again. We start realizing these different scenarios that are played out for us in real life, putting it together. What had happened? How Japhet barbarians came into Rome, and there was, when you speak of Rome, then now you have to speak of what part of Rome? Because now it's split, right? What was the split? Right? Was it two same Romes, or was it, you know what I mean, Rome and a new Rome, right? And these barbarians go into places, don't they call it New York, New Amsterdam, New Scandinavia, New Nososcovia? We always do this new